Okay, we should be set.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming together for this regular city council meeting. It is 7:01 p.m. on May 11th, 2021. And consistent with the provisions of the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act, we are meeting tonight online. We will go ahead and I will call this meeting to order. And Summer, will you take us through a roll call attendance, please?
Will do. We have Mayor Emily Niehaus, Tawny Knudsen Boyd, Moab City Council, Ben Billingsley, Finance Director, Brett Edge, Police Chief, Carly Castle, Deputy City Manager, Chuck Williams, City Engineer, Joel Linares, City Manager, Kaylin Jones, Moab City Council, Karen Guzman Newton, Moab City Council, Carrie Kirk, Deputy Recorder, Lori Simonson, City Attorney, Levi Jones, Public Works Director, Mike Duncan, Moab City Council, and Ronnie Durestri, Moab City Council.
Thank you, Summer. We are going to move into sections 2 and 3 of our city council meeting tonight. So what I'd like to go ahead and do is allow anybody that's in the waiting room to come on in. So item 2 of our city council meeting is citizens to be heard. So Summer, how many do you have that we have received at this point?
I had 2 that were received for citizens to be heard. I did not have any forms that were received for the public hearings.
Okay, thank you. And consistent with our meetings, our Zoom meetings, citizens can both write in and participate through Zoom for our meetings. So we've got an 801. Is that the only person that was in the waiting room, Summer?
That is the only one at this point.
Okay, so I'll just ask the person that's 801, go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name, and please let us know what you're calling in for, whether it's as a citizen to be heard or for the public, either public hearing. Because at this point, I will open the public hearing as well, 3.1 and 3.2. Public hearing for the city's Moab fiscal year 2021-2022 budget, as well as the proposed ordinance 2021-11, adopting the pay plan schedule and appointed exempt and salaried elected salaries. 801, welcome. Looks like you're unmuted.
Thank you.
Go ahead and state your name and let us know what you're calling in for.
Don Windsor, and I live in Rim Village. I'm calling in about the public comments for the Keep Moab Quiet Again.
Wonderful. Well, you've got 2 minutes. Let us know what's on your mind.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if I need to make a comment right now, but I just wanted to listen in and see what's going on.
Wonderful. Well, you are in our Zoom world, and what we like to do is direct folks to the YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and then you search Moab City, you'll find our channel. It'll show that we're streaming live, and that way you can more easily and conveniently follow us on our meeting this evening. But since you're here, you do have 2 minutes if you want to make any last comments before we say goodbye.
No, I'll go ahead and get on the Zoom, or can I listen on this one?
Go ahead and go to the YouTube page if you don't mind. And thanks for your civic participation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Michael Atkinson. Michael, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and now's the time to share with us your comments.
Yes, Mayor.
Yes. Welcome to our meeting.
I'm like the other gentleman. I was just listening in. So I'll go over to the YouTube. Thank you.
Well, thanks for your engagement. We'll see you later. Summer, is there anybody else? Summer,
Sorry, I do not have anyone else in the waiting room at this point.
Okay. Well, That is something. We will move on to our next agenda item then. Administrative reports, section 4, starting with 4.1 city manager updates. Joel?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to just give a couple brief updates, and then we're going to hear from the chief, the city engineer, the public works director, and then the deputy city manager. It says finance department on the agenda, but we're going to have Ben just participate during the budget workshop. So I have just a couple things. The city is moving towards opening City Hall in its entirety. No restrictions other than masks will be required for coming into City Hall on June 1st. At that point, all of our, well, the vast majority of our City Hall staff should be vaccinated, and it will run their 2 to 3 week period following vaccination. So masks will still be required, but on June 1st, we're looking to just be open as if we were pre-COVID, other than you have to wear a mask when you're coming in. The only other thing I wanted to report on real quickly was the city received a grant over the last week for the MARC. That grant is coming from state of Utah, and it will cover the entirety of the cost of the HVAC system. The grant in its total will be about $150,000. And so about 60 of that is going to go to the HVAC system, and the remainder will go to improvements over at the MARC. So that is a huge grant. I think it's probably the largest grant we've gotten since I've been here, and I wanted to report to the council that our HVAC system is going to be covered and all those improvements we just did. So that's really good news. With that said, I'll turn the time over to the chief and let him talk, followed by Chuck, and then Levi, and then Carly.
Thanks, Joel. Welcome, Chief. Thanks for joining us tonight. Good to see you.
You as well. Thank you. Not a whole lot to report, but I would like to give you an update on our employment status. We have been through multiple rounds of interviews, and we still have more to do for police officer and assistant chief positions. We have made 10 offers. Out of that, 1 declined, 1 never responded. We had 2 just this week, unfortunately, withdraw due to housing costs. They couldn't find affordable housing in Moab, so they had to withdraw from the process. And we have 6 who are still going through the process. 1 of those will be starting on May 31st, and then the rest will be coming on board, provided that they get through the background and other selection process criteria. They'll be coming on board sometime June and July. As I said, we will continue to do interviews for the police officer position. We still have, if all 6 of the ones currently in process go through successfully, we'll still have 2 open positions. So we're going to continue to accept applications and to do interviews for those open positions. We have 1 new part-time officer in the application process. I don't anticipate that we'll have any issues with that one, but that will also contribute significantly to helping us with some of our staffing issues. And we'll be making a decision on assistant chief very, very soon. So we're moving along, and things are looking up. We completed the citizen use of force review about 2 weeks ago, and I will shortly be writing a summary and of the process and the revisions that we made, and then that'll be provided to local media and published on Facebook and on our website. We are working with Larson Davis and also Les, the sound expert, noise expert, to do training for our officers. The sound meter training with Larson Davis will be on either June 29th or June 30th. And we are tentatively scheduling the noise training with Les for July 13th and 14th. And then, that gives us an opportunity to get at least a couple of the new officers, hopefully, into that training as well. And then we'll be able to really start doubling down on noise enforcement. And then lastly, Memorial Weekend, due to staffing constraints, I will be pulling patrol shifts Thursday through Sunday. primarily working traffic, but I'll also be call responsive, working from 6 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. And I will also be participating with the county at Sand Flats on Thursday from 9 to 11 as they're doing some of the voluntary noise testing at the sound booth. That's what I've got. Any questions?
Council, Karen?
Yeah, Chief, I was just curious. I mean, we in the past have occasionally gotten updates on typical calls that you are seeing through in the city. Do you have an update on that? What sort of responses or that you're having to react to within our community?
Really nothing unique. It's still we've had a lot of crashes, primarily fender benders, but a lot of traffic related issues. Still, your typical assaults, domestic violence. There have been some substance abuse and other, that type of crime, some property crime, but I mean, really nothing unique.
Any changes with the highway widening?
No, nothing. We did put the radar trailer on the north side of town to help slow down some traffic. And for a few days, we had one of our old patrol cars parked on the side of the road, unoccupied, but parked on the side of the road. And I can attest that it was actually working to slow people down. I was coming into town after going for a hike and had a car. We had just come across the river bridge and a car went by me probably 10 to 15 miles per hour over the speed limit. We rounded the curve, and as soon as the car came into view, the red light or the tail lights came on and the front end dove down, and he slowed down considerably. So, believe what you will about it, but I think it actually worked to some extent. We had to move it today out of the way because the road construction crew needed to access that area, so it's not up there right now. But we're not opposed to using it judiciously when necessary.
If I can attest that it works.
I'm glad to hear it, Karen.
Certain towns are famous for that, both in Colorado and Utah. You know that, Brett. So.
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I suspect
We just need a dummy cop for the car.
Well, yeah,
I guess I could just say that.
cost is less. Okay, thanks, Brett. Any other questions for Brett?
I'd just like to thank you for your service. I'm sorry to hear that you're having to pull shifts yourself and the challenges of hiring here. I was just wondering if you've had any, with the change in the mask mandate and rules here, if you've had any need to respond to any issues related to that.
No, I'm not aware of a single call.
Okay, thanks.
And on the city's end of that, we still have a mask order at City Hall and in city buildings, and we have not had any issues with it either since it ended.
Well, thank you so much, Brett.
Thank you.
Next is engineering. Chuck?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Always fun to follow the chief. So what I'd like to do is, you see my screen shared there for engineering reports?
Yes.
I just thought I could quickly walk you through some of the items here. On the 191 widening, they're paving tonight and tomorrow night, and then the main line paving will be completed, barring the unforeseen. And then over the next week, they'll be working on the approaches, major driveways to businesses, and then side streets to get those done. And hopefully by the week after that, almost all of the paving will be done. And then it'll be striped this Thursday and Friday also to its final lane configuration. So, and while I just wanted to mention, so the folks listening know that during the day, they still have to close the lanes, typically the outside lanes, because we're working on the sidewalk, not much curb and gutter, but mainly the sidewalk. But they're going to have to raise water and sewer rims on the inner lanes too. So during the day, and maybe even sometimes at night, they'll still be closed. But on the weekends now, it should be wide open every weekend, barring unforeseen stuff. So it's been a long time coming, but we're hopefully just about there with the lanes. Work completed sometime in July or August. That's 100%. That doesn't necessarily mean the paving work, because there's a lot of off-highway work that's going on with the storm drains and that as well, that might not be as visible to the public. USU campus progress
Hey, Chuck,
continues.
just real quick, let's make sure that we get that information. We continue to push that information out to the public though, just in case, because I know there's going to be like, are we done yet? Are we done yet? So
Yeah.
whatever we can do to.
Will do. I'll continue to work with Lisa, and UDOT has done, I think, a fair job with a pretty good job with their public involvement officer. But yes, I'll do that. USU campus continuing progress. The walls have been going up. They're still on track, to my knowledge, to be completed in December of this year. Lions back. The offsite utilities are about 75% completed now, with going to planning and zoning this week. At just FYI, for their phase 1 benefits. Transportation plans. There's 2 of them, if you'll recall. There's the regional plan, which is the UDOT driven plan, which we've had a lot of discussion about with council. I received the final just last Friday. I've looked through it. There is no bypass listed as a project. There is about a 1-page discussion of the bypass, but it says that, I can tell you there's not in there as a project. The question I had was, one of the things that we had talked with council about before was UDOT would hope that because we were involved, that we could get a letter of support from the city and the county and San Juan County. And they understand, when we've talked to them, and Carly and I have talked to them, said if it comes, we would have the bypass resolution attached in language to that effect. And if council is still willing to do that, I guess I'm asking if council feels good enough that that's something the mayor could do, or should we come back as a council agenda item for that? If you could.
That's a good question. Kaylin, do you want to speak to that? Your feelings on that?
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I imagine we will support it, but just for the process, I think it'd be worth coming back to us after we've had a chance to review the document, and then there'll be no question about our support.
So like as an agenda item?
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Chuck? Sound good?
It does. And what I'll do is I'll send it out to all the council members, so you have that that final report for your perusal. Okay.
I can't see other council members because of the screen share. Did anyone else want to speak? Scrolling through. Okay, Chuck. Thanks. Keep on plugging on. Keep on heading us downriver.
Okay, downriver we go. Unified plan, which is the joint city-county plan. We have received 5 proposals from engineering/transportation planning firms. We're in the process of evaluating them, 3 members of city staff and 3 members of county staff. We're hoping that we just don't know if we're going to have to do interviews or not. So we could be before council, hopefully, commission, excuse me, because they're the contracting agency, the first week of June, or their first meeting of June. That's our goal, but it might slip to the second meeting if we have to have interviews. But that's moving forward. Well number 12, we received bids last week, and the low bid was $318,000, which was less than the engineer's estimate. And I received today a letter of recommendation from our consultant, because they evaluate for all the paperwork and this and that, and then we double check it. And I anticipate that that'll be on next council's meeting for hopefully your approval of award of the contract to the driller. And that's from the bond proceeds. Okay. The water facilities evaluation began. Joel signed that proposal in order to move forward. And what that is that's part of the security and optimization project that was in the bond project. And that's where we're evaluating the facilities, both to bring them up to, in case they're not quite at standard, we'll bring them up to standard. And we're also going to do what we can to secure them, both from a cyber standpoint as well as from a physical standpoint, and optimize their use. And that was also in the bond. So we're moving forward on those. And then the Mill Creek Drive Water Distribution Improvements Project, we're hoping to be out to bid in June. That's replacing about 4,000 feet of aged some of it World War II era water line. And that was also per the bond. And then lastly, the two things we're doing is we've been working and preparing for the water, what we're calling the water workshop, but it's forthcoming, is my understanding, either in May or June. So we're spending a lot of time, staff and I, trying to pull together, work with Carly and Mila, and try and have the numbers in a meaningful format for council. And then we're also preparing for a May-June speed limit workshop as well. We haven't forgotten about that. We're just trying to fit it all in. That was all I had, and be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Chuck, the May, June water
Chuck, go
workshop.
ahead and unshare your screen so we can just see everybody, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chuck, any particular topic on that May, June water workshop?
Really, Carly's pulling that together, Mike. I'm just trying to pull together a lot of the data that's not the scientific data, but a lot of the usage data in the valley that's available, that I think I'm hoping that we can be able to answer some questions that are really hard to dive into to get the answers to, but that I think now we're taking the time to do it, is what I'm suggesting to you.
Yeah, well, that would be great. You guys know that Mark Stilson, he thinks that there's some water, but not a lot of water, either in the Valleyfield aquifer and the other aquifers to grow on. So hopefully that'll be part of the conversation.
Yeah, we're looking at future growth numbers to be part of that conversation as well. We're scrubbing it pretty hard.
Thank you.
Yes.
Chuck, you're busy.
It'll
Bless
keep
all
me
the
young.
growth.
Keeps you young.
I like that. Thank you so much for preparing that list. That was really helpful and informative. Unless you got anything else to share, we will shift over to you, Levi. Hi. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, Council. Thank you. Yeah, just to refresh everybody's memory, Public Works consists of the water department, streets, facilities, maintenance on Walnut Lane, fleet, and then admin. The water department, we've replaced a couple service lines recently, installed 2 new hydrants this last quarter, one on Mountain View, another one on Sand Flats. Been working closely on the widening project. Like Chuck said, the only thing left we have is raising water valves. And streets, they did some big patches, the ones on 100 South, 300 South, and 100 West. Got the big ones out of the way finally. Have some smaller ones to work on. They started striping. They did a big project on 100 East. Then rearranged some parking on 100 North. Getting on top of the weeds and started trimming trees. Facilities, even with everybody getting vaccinated, they're still busy cleaning, sanitizing all the city buildings. Had one staff member in facilities helping out with the MRAC, shorthanded there. The HVAC system is complete, with the exception of energizing the system at the MRAC, at the MARC. We're waiting on Rocky Mountain Power to upgrade a transformer. That work is supposed to take place tomorrow. With new staff coming on board, been moving, facilities have been helping reorganize some of the offices. Maintenance on Walnut Lane, we've had shower, all the Swan coolers have been serviced. Helped move the trailer to make room for a driveway for phase 1. Helped with all those service connections. Fleet's been busy repairing all the citywide fleet equipment. Citywide fleet, it includes parks, PD, and sewer vehicles. Admin's been working closely with Chuck, all the engineering projects, water conservation with Carly, Chuck, and Mila. Half of public works staff's been recertified as flaggers. The other half will be recertified in the next couple of weeks. One of the bigger projects Public Works worked on was the Bike Skills Park. Streets helped out installing the storm drain, the foundation work for the bathroom. They did all the concrete work around the bathroom and connecting to the footpath. They did an excellent job finishing that concrete. The water department installed a new water service connection for the bathroom and then hooked up the utilities, the water utility, and installed drinking fountain on the outside. That is about it.
Thanks for that, Levi. Oscar and I just went down and looked at the Bike Skills Park. It's so nice. The bathroom really turned out great.
It turned out really well. Staff did a really good job. I can't thank them enough. They did awesome.
Council, any questions for Levi? Karen?
Sorry, hi Levi. Just
Karen.
quickly, just curious, the raising of the water valves on the North Highway project, do you foresee any disruptions to businesses or like more disruptions on the sidewalks? I mean, I'm not sure where those are taking place.
Yeah, majority of them are either in the shoulder or the outside lane. So it is going to be an interruption to travel and some of the intersections or the pullouts to some of the businesses. Some of their service connections or main lines run in those driveways. So be temporarily blocked or sectioned off so they can cut a section of asphalt, raise those valves, and then they pour a concrete ring once they get those flush. So there will be some interruptions. It'll be minimal. It shouldn't take that long. There's only 24 valves out there, but it will be an interruption.
And will be informed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Levi, will there be a disruption to water service to any of those businesses?
Unless they dig down and break something, there shouldn't be any interruption in service at all.
Any other questions from council members for Levi? Levi, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
What's next? Okay, so we're not doing the finance department update because we've got, well, a very large agenda item with you later tonight, Ben. So, Carly, we're putting you on the hot spot.
I see what you did there. Oh my goodness. You've been thinking about that this whole time. Yeah, hi council. I'm just going to provide you with a quick update on hotspot funding. So just a continuation of last week's discussion. Originally, we had planned to have the whole hotspot package to the Transportation Commission by the end of May. That's when their meeting is, but we are bumping it now to June so we can, me, Fair and Peers, and UDOT will be presenting to the Grand County Commission next Tuesday, to get their input on the different options, as well as see about a commitment on a joint funding proposal from both us and Grand County. So that's the timeline thus far. Expect to see this probably back before you, depending on how that conversation goes, at your next meeting.
That's really great. Thank you so much, Carly, for that brief update. Council questions? Karen? Oh, you just,
The opposite. So Carly, do you foresee an ILA happening?
I think that would be my preference. I think we're open to maybe an MOU, but something in writing, some sort of agreement that spells out everyone's roles.
And will you want to have that before they present in June?
I think what they've asked for is a resolution from each of us, and that may be sufficient. They may change their minds, but I've heard of the resolution being absolutely something they need. An ILA, I imagine, might be through, between all three of us, or just us in the county, but we'll take UDOT's direction on what makes them feel most comfortable.
Well, and we'll definitely want some kind of agreement with the county on how they'd like to participate so that we can do a good job of budgeting and preparing. Karen, in sitting on the hotspot committee, there was interest and conversation. Like where did you leave it with as a committee?
In terms of what, Mayor? I'm sorry.
In terms of like fiscal responsibility for moving
Well,
forward
I
with
mean,
projects.
yeah, I mean, it seemed like we, at our joint meeting that we were in agreement that as a county and a city that we were going to be responsible for, if we're talking about the transit portion, that we would equally be responsible. So I don't know if that sentiment has changed. I don't know if Carly has a better idea, if you've spoken to staff over at the county. I'm not sure, but when we were in our meetings, it seemed like there was an agreement to move forward with that together. So,
Do you think it's worth it for you? And why do I always forget if it was Kaylin or Mike on the hotspot committee?
they both were.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's why. Would it be worth it to, I mean, I guess that's 3 of you, so it's complicated, but would it be worth it to have like a, I don't know, like interact in some way with the
County.
commission
Yes.
prior to their meeting on Tuesday?
It's on my list.
Yeah. So how do you think you're going to do that?
Call up one of the other commission members who was on the hotspot, the only lasting commission member who was on the hotspot, and see if they're get his advice as to if somebody, 2 other members need to be involved, like 2 newer members. But yeah, my intent was to get a hold of Evan and see what we need to do moving forward.
So, Mayor, you may have a point. I mean, I was in on this in part, and the county was certainly interested early on because the anticipated transit routes ran, well beyond the southern edge of the city's boundary, and they were hoping it might go to, say, Spanish Valley Arena. Maybe they would get involved as a bus barn. I mean, they had some definitive reasons why they would participate in the plan. Now, the latest transit plan, I think on the south edge of it, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, I think it just goes to Mill Creek Drive, just barely to the city limits. So they may have less incentive to participate, but we certainly hope they do, because obviously the cost sharing would be easier for us both to bear if there's advantages to both.
Well, I think it's important to share with the share history with the new commissioners, right? The county went through an election. There are several new commissioners. They may not be, I mean, as much as we all think we're connected to every issue, they may not be fully informed of the process of, where we were with the parking structure, how we made the pivot, and then all the good work that went in, with the hotspot committee. And so it might be worth it, if it's coming to them as like a vote or a discussion on the item, it may be worth it to put together something to help those commissioners that are new to the scene.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that is what we plan to do. That's sort of my role in the presentation, which is like a where we've been and where we're going kind of retrospective for them.
Oh, you're involved in it, Carly?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. I'll get with you and we can figure out what we need to do. And I am still a little confused in option 4, how far it's going.
Yeah, and it's a good thing to actually mention to the county. Actually, the transit option is 100% in the county. We are county residents. This is, they collect a TRT, they collect a property tax. They're the ones doing economic development for our area. It is in the county. All proposed alternatives are.
It's a really good point. Okay, any other comments about hotspot? Okay, we'll move on.
That's all I got, Mayor, for council or for admin reports tonight. Just want to thank staff and all their hard work and getting us through COVID and keeping us balanced and financially afoot, and all their hard work on grants and getting money where we've never had money. Obviously this year with COVID, the federal government, the state governments have made grants available like they've never been available before. So it's not sustainable long term, but we've definitely pulled in more grant money this year than we've ever pulled in any given year. And it's because of the dedication and the work of the staff members, making sure that they're getting those in timely and getting them filled out properly so they can be awarded, and then keeping up to date on the reports and everything that goes into it. So as they go in for future grants, that they're still being awarded more. So can't thank staff enough for all their hard work and everything they're doing, and turn the time back over to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. Thanks, staff. And moving on to section 5, mayor and council reports. Okay. I attended a water quality board meeting. My term actually ends in August, and I spoke with Carly and introduced her to Erica, who is the executive director of the water quality board. And Carly, I won't speak for you, I'll let you speak for yourself, but encouraged Carly to apply to be on that board.
Yep, I'm speaking with her this Friday about it. I'm very excited.
Yeah, it really is a very, it's kind of like CIB board gets a lot of attention, but water quality is like one of those boards where there's a lot of money that flows through. It's where we got the funding for our wastewater reclamation facility. It's who we owe a bunch of money to, and it's good to be involved in the, in the process there, especially as this is, like I've said before, it feels like the year for water. So there's that. Oh, I wanted to share with all of you that after our last meeting, I got a call the next morning from Senator Bramble. And he said, thank you. He wanted to thank us for taking our marching orders and following his instructions and doing our work with our tool, which is the noise ordinance, and passing what we passed. And I said, are you mad at us? And he said, no. And I said, are you going to put legislation forward? And he said he doesn't have any intention to do so. So I was very grateful that he called and shared that positivity. And I just wanted to thank you, council. I know that that was a really very difficult decision, and I think you all did a great job with it. And Senator Bramble does intend to come down. So when he does, maybe we can set up a time where some of us can get together with him, or, at different times or whatever, and just continue to tell our story. Because I think that's what is going to be really valuable for us, to be able to hold on to the legislative power that you all have as a council. Okay, what else? There are some upcoming events. I met with Kristen Ramirez Marsh with Full Circle, and there are some upcoming events. So I just want to say that, through the summer and fall, there's a powwow that is getting planned. They're looking at doing it at Lions Park, and which is, I think, a really great place for them to host their 2-day powwow event. So it's more just kind of keep the radar open for that. I'm hopeful to be very supportive of them. Full Circle is Native run and Native membership, a Native organization. And so whatever we can do to support them, I'd like to support them. It was Arbor Day, and I celebrated planting some trees with charter school kindergartners and 6th graders. That was really fun. Philip, our arborist, had certain locations of planting trees, and one of them was Dixie Park. And I said, well, if we're planting there, we might as well have some kids come up. And so it was a really great event. So I wanted to thank staff for, we had staff attending as well. And I just wanted to thank staff for making that a really great event. Kaylin, I just want to put a bug in your ear about, I'm hearing a lot about community composting. And with the sale of Monument to the Special Service District, and since you are the leader as the chair, I'd like to put a bug in your ear as well as plant a seed in your compost about the idea of community composting and kitchen scraps. And I know that you're all very full with the transition, but maybe with transition comes new change and growth. But it has been a conversation for a while, and Dr. Dr. McCann now is very, very interested. And so there is community support for that effort. I'm sure you get this like once a week by now, but
well, no, it comes in waves, and it's on our radar. We did budget money for a consultant to do a compost study to try to, because there's multiple systems we can use, and we have our own unique mix of feedstock and physical facilities. So just trying to figure out what's optimal for us is a little bit of a project. We had budgeted for it, but then this other opportunity came along. So
yeah.
So yeah, it's very much on our radar. And then yes, there was already a bug in my ear this week. So thank you.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay. Lots of bugs about compost. I love it. I'm really looking forward to the United Transportation Plan because I've had some meetings about bicycles and e-bikes and scooters and where and the balance. And just over the past 2 weeks, it really made it clear that while the regional plan felt like we were a bit detached as it was UDOT's regional plan, this Unified Transportation Plan, this is all for us and about us. And so I just want to say to all of you, council members and staff and members of the community that are listening, we're trying to get organized around multimodal transportation, and it's complicated. I'm very appreciative of the comments that we've been receiving through email and phone calls and texts and letters, just that people have some strong feelings about scooters and bikes and everything. But this unified plan is really hopefully going to bring all things together and give us the time to do the community outreach to be able to reach those big decisions. And speaking of transportation, UDOT leadership came down this past, was it last week? Or the week before, 2 weeks ago. Okay. They came down. They, of course, had some projects to be looking at. But it was Carlos, the director, and his UDOT leadership. I'm very grateful that they came down. We did our best to tell Moab's story. So, while conversation, we were asked about the, bypass and hotspot and, topics like that, it really was more of a tell our story. Tawny was at the meeting as well. And I think it was really helpful for us to be able to share why these conversations are complicated in our valley. And so I'm very grateful that meeting happened, and that's it from me for the past 2 weeks. Next up is Ronnie.
So my week was pretty simple. We had our EMS meeting. We didn't have a meeting last month for various reasons. So we met, and some scary things happening in terms of numbers. For example, we looked at our January through April number of calls for the last few years, and you can look, like in 2018, we had 387 calls in that period. And this year we have 487. So that's up by 100. So just some things. We know, yes, calls have been, increasing calls have been a concern. So continue to be something we talk about and try and figure out what to do. They weren't exactly sure what was driving the increase. They do break down the types of calls. And interestingly,
if you look at kind of where types of calls grew, we seem to have an increase in the number of refusals. And they said, you know, sometimes you respond to an accident with 6 people and 1 person is transported, but 5 refuse or don't need transport. So you only count that 1. So sometimes it's stuff like that, but sometimes, you know, people don't want help or they want to drive themselves to the hospital, what have you. Increase in backcountry calls too. Not too sure what's going on there either. Although now Jim Webster of Search and Rescue is on our board, and he did mention, as probably a lot of us have heard around the country, that they do feel like there are probably more people getting out in the backcountry with fewer skills than they used to have, and that could be contributing. Let's see. The building is underway and going up, and I did encourage the director to have the city and county council commission come up for a tour when it's done, and then maybe they can give us the report on the last year or two. Let's see. Sorry, having trouble reading my own marks on my document. Let's see. And so in terms of dealing with increasing call volume, we're still trying to figure out, sometimes increasing staff is the answer and sometimes it isn't, you know, because you really don't want to commit long-term to more staff unless you're ready to do that. So anyway, that's something we're looking at. And we also find now with COVID declining and people out and about more people are, you know, moving back to seasonal jobs they used to have in other industries. Some of our folks have seasonal jobs doing other things, whether it's outfitting or fire or park service jobs. Let's see, COVID, EMS staff is 100% vaccinated, yay, yay, and extra yay, because it sounds like sometimes they are still dealing with COVID positive patients and involved. Let me just see if there is anything else I thought would be of interest. That's probably the bulk of it. That's it for me. If anybody wants to see the report or the pictures of the building, if you don't want to walk up there yourself, let me know. Thanks.
Thanks, Ronnie. Hey, Ronnie, you were breaking up just a little bit. Hey, everybody, was that my internet or Ronnie's internet?
I fear it's mine. I'm having some problems. I had some problems in the EMS meeting today, so I switched to my phone for this reason, but maybe I'll switch back to the house.
Yeah, I feel like I missed something about COVID patients and EMS. Could you repeat that?
Oh yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. We do have 100% of our staff at EMS vaccinated now, which is, you know, just extra feeling of security for us, because they definitely have been taking care of COVID patients, transporting them. So just know that they are coming into contact with them.
Okay, and that was loud and clear, so it must have just been a little blip. Thanks, Ronnie. Mike.
Kevin Walker on the Grand County Commission and I had a great brainstorming session, if you will, about remote noise sensors. Les pointed out a number of things going on across the country, which is why we called him in the first place. He's a great guy to talk to. And Kevin and I are kind of changing our focus from trying to build a noise meter from the microphone up to, I mean, what I'm considering now is basically a phone whose microphone that you use and then calibrate later on and take pictures and so forth that we could park around town over the period of months, around several places around town around the period of a month, so that if you wanted to know if our noise ordinance had any effect or not, you know, a year later you'd have a quantitative way of establishing that. They would have cell phone connections in them, so it would be relayed back to anybody's computer or central database, whatever. So there's that. And then Laurie pointed out that kind of back more like our original concept of, you know, a remote sensor, you know, analogous to a speed limit sign. You're doing 33 and a 30. Here you're doing, you know, 75 dB and you're supposed to be doing 70 dB kind of thing. There's still a need for that because most motorists, UTV drivers in town really have no idea how much noise they're putting out, particularly in pass-by tests. So we could put that same sort of estimate to work there. And so I kind of like this approach of using a phone, despite some other complications, because it enables us to just concentrate on the software, basically not having to reinvent hardware. Turns out Kevin's a network geek and I'm an iPhone geek, not an iPhone, but I have written apps for phones. So anyway, there's all that. That's to look forward to. And just want to give a shout out to Mila Dunbar Irwin. She was has chaired the, well, didn't chair, but it was a driving force in getting the mandatory water conservation plan updated. It's due this August. That's coming right up. And she just has hit the ground running. So my compliments to her. She reminds me a lot of Ben, who has also hit the ground running. Thank you very much. And the same deal for Carly a year or so ago. So thanks very much to all three of you guys. You're all awesome.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for your updates. Tawny.
I don't have a whole lot, just the meeting with UDOT leadership that the mayor already mentioned. And I think that was really it. My busy week is this week and next week. So
Will you share a little more about the meeting with UDOT from your perspective?
Sure. Let me gather a thought or two here. I thought it was a really good listening session. I feel like they've heard from, you know, the engineering end and the construction end and the, you know, the UDOT mindset, but I don't think that they'd heard some of what our residents were saying and some of the frustrations that our residents have. And I think we did a good job of communicating that to them. And they took it all very well and with a lot of good humor. And I think more meetings like that would be very beneficial. It was informal and comfortable. And I think, and they seemed to take a real interest in the things that we were telling them. That's kind of my impression.
Mayor, and I had a follow-up meeting on Monday with Monty from UDOT. There was a lot of listening by UDOT that went on, and there's a perception of Moab that because we have 3 to 5 million visitors a year that we have to have money. They just couldn't understand why we didn't have any money and how we're stretched to balance budget every year. And I've had a follow-up meeting with Monty on Monday after we met with him, and he had a lot of questions about our budget and how it worked. And I spent a good number of time with him on the phone and went all through our budget and our budget history and really explained to him that we do receive more money because we have tourists coming to our community, but we're also providing services for 3 to 5 million people who come to town. And those services are tapped out just by trying to provide the tourist industry what they need by what we get out of that tax base. So it was really helpful, I thought, the original meeting with UDOT, because I think it opened eyes to the fact that we're a 5,000 member community trying to provide services for 3 to 5 million people. And that's the reality where we exist. And I thought if nothing else, at the end of the day, UDOT got a much better view of our budget and how come we're strained and how come we're having a hard time finding commitment for the projects that we are doing and how come we have a hard time with that. So I thought it was excellent. I think they had a completely different perspective of Moab and what our challenges are once the meetings were over.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Tawny. Thanks, Joel, for sharing that. Thanks for time for your report. Karen. You're muted.
There we go. Sorry. The chamber is hosting its next chamber chat Thursday, this Thursday, May 13th at 12 o'clock. The topic this week is going to be workforce shortage, identifying causes and brainstorming solutions. Their businesses are invited, council is invited to join. If you guys are interested in being a part of this conversation, a lot of it is, there's a lot of concern within the business community right now on housing more than ever before. And so if you would like to join, just reach out to Lacey, and her email address is director@moabchamber.com. I attended an airport board meeting. We discussed the funding that will be available to the airport through federal funding this coming year. It's going to be close to another $1 million will be allocated to the airport for operational expenses, which will free up money from Grand County's general fund, which is very fortunate for them. The employment numbers at the airport are up since record growth in 2019, which is another good sign for the airport. And fuel data numbers are surpassing historical records by 57%. So private jets are flying into Moab. I attended a ribbon cutting last week to celebrate the first flight to Salt Lake City via Delta Airline through SkyWest up at Canyonlands. And then I also enrolled in and started Land Use 101 Powers and Duties through the USU program. And this is a requirement for planning commissioners through HB 409. And so far, there's some really great information. And I think all of us received an invite. I recommend when you get a second to try to take the course. I think it'll be worth our while. So, and that's it.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for celebrating flights to Salt Lake. It's very exciting. Very exciting. And Kaylin, last but not least.
So the Solid Waste Special Service District acquisition and merger of Monument Waste Utah operations has happened. I attended full staff meetings at both facilities, and it seemed like morale was high. Everyone was in good spirits, and operations are proceeding as normal. I attended a housing task force meeting, and one of the things that we spent a little bit of time talking about was they're kind of like, okay, what is our role in this coming year, like as far as not lobbying, but advocacy. And so, and it seems like we don't actually necessarily need advocacy to the local government to support housing. So we spent some time talking about transportation as a component of lower income affordability, and the role that plays and some of the initiatives that the city and the county are working on. So perhaps having a more holistic discussion about helping people live here and get all their needs met. And not just, the focus has been on housing because it's the single biggest chunk, but there are other ways to nibble away at the problem. Attended a travel council meeting, and Andrea Brand from Sandflat presented. That was very interesting. They have been, per request from the county, they have been monitoring UTV data at the entrance station. And for this year to date, their survey shows that of the UTVs that have going up there, 40% are private, 26% are rental, and 30% are tour or special recreation permit.
Sorry,
So,
say that again. Give that data again.
40% private, 26% rental, and 34% tour / SRP,
What is that?
special recreation permit.
Okay, I am so sorry, but one more time, please, because this is data that is very valuable, but also contradicts some of the conversation that we've had before. So 40% is private.
Right, and she gave two sets of numbers. So it seemed like first she gave one set that was, and then she was like, but then to date, the surveys now show, so this is sort of like the updated information. So like, and I don't know how recently it was updated, so maybe there was a significantly different number. Like the previous data was 52% private, 21% rentals, and 27% tours. But it sounds like the most up to date is 40% private, 26% rental, and 34% tour / special recreation permit. And in general, to date, 2021 versus 2019, they're showing a 37% increase in visitation. And let's see, it was a very, I mean, we might want to have her come present to us as well in some slow meeting. But they are looking at different infrastructure projects up there, including some like minor rerouting of sand flats and possibly paving it. So that was interesting. And
there's also the talk of a second entrance, a second
lane.
Thank you.
Yes, right. Although they are like trying to figure out, well, where do we actually put this lane given the constraints at the booth? But yeah, so they're thinking about those things, and also wondering like, so apparently the traffic study will be happening in conjunction with the city, sort of in response to the pending Lionsback development. And then one thing that might play into that is that the Mill Creek planning process may ultimately, sounds like, recommend shutting down the existing parking lot at least part of the year and moving that up to Potato Salad Hill, which would then drive more traffic up Sand Flats for better or worse. So interesting planning efforts going on there. One of the council members, Katie, in her new job, the business that she works for is partnering with Rocky Mountaineer, and she reports that the rail siding will likely be at the Dinosaur Museum, but that's still in the works, not finalized, but that roughly 150 to 200 people a day will be arriving and departing per day via that business. And that is basically it for me.
Thanks, Kaylin. That concludes item number 5 on our agenda. We are now on to item number 6, approval of the minutes from April 27, 2021. Is there a motion? Mike, I think that's you, but you're muted. Is that a move to approve?
I move to approve.
Sorry.
Okay, Kaylin beat you to it. All right, I'll take a motion from Kaylin and a second from
Mike.
Comments, corrections?
I sent a few to Summer. She took care of them. Thanks, Summer.
Thanks, Ronnie.
You're welcome.
And I will call for the vote. Ronnie.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Tawny.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Kaylin.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Item 7, old business. 7.1, continued discussion regarding Bird Scooter's proposal to enter into a temporary operating agreement with the city for a pilot program. This is briefing and possible action. And I just want to say, Carly and I talked this morning. We're going to give Carly the floor to give more information because after our last meeting, we've got generated questions, of course, about all things. We want to be really specific about what we can and can't do, and what what action would mean moving forward. But then ultimately, after you make your presentation, like I was saying earlier in my report, we have in front of us a unified transportation plan process where we're going to be collecting a lot of just a lot of comments and public outreach is what I wanted to say. So that a motion might be around that, around taking a moment to follow through that. But Carly, take it away.
Mayor, thanks so much. That That was a great introduction, actually. You set it up nicely. Yeah, so I'm here to provide some context and maybe the framework that might make it helpful for you to understand kind of how staff is thinking about this, why we're recommending what we're recommending. And so we also want your feedback. And like the mayor said, we think we do have a proposed way forward where we can gather more information, understand this proposal before us. So I have a presentation to show, and I can see some of you, but not all of you. So feel free to interrupt me when I'm presenting as I'm going. And in the meantime, I'll share my screen. Okay, and then of course I always forget how to play this. All right, so the biggest question I think that I've been hearing is, are we forced to allow e-scooter operators in Moab? Is it something that we have to do? And I don't have a clean answer for you, but I do think I do have an answer. There was a bill passed called SB 139 in 2019, and it has a lot of provisions about e-scooter operations generally. So many legislatures have updated their traffic code to include e-scooters because they realized they didn't really fit with other motor vehicles. So the state of Utah was no different. But in addition, they also put some like standardized requirements for cities who want to regulate them. And one of the regulations that is in there is, sorry, I've got to move you guys to the side here. In regulating a shared scooter or scooter share program, a local authority may not impose any unduly restrictive requirement on a scooter share operator. So Bird is that scooter share operator. We're not allowed to have an unduly restrictive requirement. My concern, and I've spoken a little bit with Lori about this, is that prohibiting them outright is unduly restrictive, and that we need to try to find a path forward for the regulation of a scooter share operator here in Moab. Additionally, watching some of the interim session discussions about this bill, it gives me the impression that is what the legislature had in mind too. People can watch those committee hearings though and have different takeaways, but it was just sort of my general impression that they meant for cities to have to allow them. So we might be able to work a clever legal argument as to why we don't think this, it's unduly restrictive, but I do worry about the legislature maybe going back and fixing it or some sort of, clamping down more and more on our ability to regulate them, if that makes sense. Any questions so far on that? Okay, great. Okay, and I'm sorry if this is a little small, but...
Actually, I do have a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Keelan.
Could you clarify to me if that legislation happened before or after Salt Lake City's initial experience with e-scooters?
I think it was after,
Oh.
Yes. So 2019, I feel like they landed there at like 2018 in Salt Lake. And the problem there was no framework. They were kind of brand new onto the scene. So,
okay, thanks.
Yeah, that is my recollection of the timeline. So when it comes to managing them or regulating them, there are actually kind of three approaches that come to mind in my mind. I'm open to hearing more too. So, and I should go back. So when it comes to regulation, when that's in SB 139 or now in the traffic code, what that means is when we are regulating them by ordinance, that's when that applies, because it's our ordinance, it's our regulation arm that we're using. So things are different, however, if we are regulating them or not regulating them, but we enter into agreements with them. That's a different authority that we're using. We're not using our regulatory authority, we're using a contracting authority. So when I'm talking about an ordinance, think about that state statute kicking in, okay? So the pros of an ordinance are, one, it's consistent across the board. It applies equally to all scooter companies. They know what to expect. We know what to expect. It's automatic. They just sort of fill out a business license. It's not very administratively cumbersome for us to do. It's nice and quick. And it allows for law enforcement and code enforcement to play an active role. So those are kind of the benefits I've thought of by ordinance. The cons are there are statutory limitations in what we can regulate with the ordinance. I will, in the next slide, talk about those limitations. But if we go the ordinance route, where our wings are a little clipped. Each company would be entitled to operate if they met the ordinance requirements. So it'd sort of be, the floodgates would be open. If we were to revoke a license, some sort of process would have to be in place. That takes time, that takes proof, all those kinds of things. And there's a question of like, is one size fits all a good solution? Because they're all kind of different companies with different business models. A second option is to do a temporary operating agreement with them. So this is when we're using our contracting authority and we have much more flexibility because the company is agreeing to more stringent standards, right? We're not regulating them, it's more like a partnership. So the pros of this is it's flexible. We can amend contracts, agreements, all of that kind of stuff. It's tailored to each company. They're terminable. If they're not working, we can have either someone like Bird can say this operation isn't working for us, we're packing up and going home. Or the city can say, you're not meeting these terms that you said you would. You've had 2 weeks to comply and we're revoking this operating agreement. And like I said, we can require additional regulations as part of the negotiation. So that's the benefit of something like that. The cons are they are cumbersome. We have to negotiate with each company that comes to town and wants to operate. It lacks sort of a cohesive management scheme or a cohesive vision for all of them if we're just sort of taking them one by one and trying to figure out, how they fit into the whole scheme. And enforcement is harder in this scenario. I'll give an example. I'm not saying this is what we would do, but this is just an easy one to conceive of. If, as part of our ordinance, we required they wear helmets, and we see, police officers see someone not wearing a helmet, they could pull over that scooter rider and say, where's your helmet? Here's a ticket. But if we're doing a temporary operating agreement and we require as part of that operating agreement that their riders wear helmets, our problem is with Bird and their enforcement of their terms of service. The police officer can't necessarily go and say, you're not agreeing with Bird's terms of service, here's a ticket. Does that make sense? Why that's a distinguishment of how we would enforce it? And then, so that's a temporary operating agreement. The third
Carly, just real quick. So like, would each scooter have a helmet and you would put like a sweaty helmet on that other people can wear?
I was like, this probably won't be the thing. I didn't want to go down the helmet route because I didn't know how it would happen. We can recommend definitely helmets, but there are a lot of questions out there about that.
I have lots of questions around helmets, but sorry, I don't want to.
Totally understand. Okay, so the third option is with an RFP process. So what this would look like is the city says, we pass maybe an ordinance that gives us the authority to do this. We would issue a competitive RFP and we could say, 2 scooter share companies that meet the criteria get to operate exclusively here in Moab. And the pros of this is it's competitive. So the scooter companies are going to try to market themselves to us and try to tailor themselves to our market. And it gives them an incentive to give us what we want, right? It's like the temporary operating agreement is tailored to their specific operations and to our needs as a city. And we can also limit how many companies operate in town. We think we can have up to 3 at 100 scooters each. So, it's a sort of convince us that you're the company that's best for Moab. The cons of an RFP right now is that we don't have the info we need to appropriately design the RFP. We don't know how many scooters we need here to serve conceivably. We don't have any program goals. We don't know what kind of data we want and why. So an RFP is a little premature at this point, but might be something we want to work towards. Any questions so far on that? Okay.
Well, Carly, I may ask one. Is there any realistic chance that if one scooter company is already established in town, in a town of Moab size, that another second company would want to come and compete, do you think?
Well, you know, it's funny you say that, Mike. We have been approached by a second company. So yes, that is possible.
Really?
And you know what happens? I heard this sort of anecdotally from Salt Lake City, is when they start competing with each other, when it's non-exclusive, it is a disincentive for a company to regulate their scooter users, because their options are to either to kick people off the app. So say I'm a repeat offender, I keep like throwing my scooter into the street or wherever it is, or I ignore speed limits, or I ignore signage, everything like that. An enforcement mechanism we have is that one of the scooter companies locks them out of the app. They can't use it anymore. But then they don't want to do that because they know they're going to go to a competitor. So by actually creating an RFP in like a competitive place, it makes them more responsible, like as a business, because they know that, you know, their lost customer isn't going to go to a competitor necessarily, if that makes sense. It's very interesting when they all start operating kind of together. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I know I wanted to just touch on briefly, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but some of our statutory limitations that we have to deal with if we go the ordinance route. So it might be something you're interested in, but I thought you and the public should be aware. I mentioned the unduly restrictive requirement already. It spells out like insurance thresholds, it talks about indemnification, it caps or fees on reasonable and necessary costs of administration of the program. We are permitted to designate staging areas for the scooters, but they must be permitted on each city block in a commercial zone or business district. So, and I think on each side. So if we went the ordinance route, we would need to find designated staging areas on like every single block on Main Street, for example, on each side. Takes up a lot of space. It allows us to require anonymized data, but doesn't really get into specifics. It makes it so we have to regulate them consistently with bicycles. So that's a huge issue because we allow bikes kind of everywhere and at different speeds here in town. You know, we can't require them to provide operations below costs. We can't require them to provide their services for free or below what it costs them to provide it. So that makes maybe like low income options hard, any sort of low income programs. And it does talk about, you know, us not being able to regulate the scooter rider users more restrictively than, you know, privately owned motor assisted scooters or bicycles. Just some information about the statutory framework we work under. Any questions? Great.
I've got one, Carly.
Yeah, Tani.
So is what that's saying is we don't have any regulatory power over who rides those scooters. I mean, I'm not overly familiar with them, but I see lots of little kids riding them. So does that mean anybody that can get on that app can ride them on any street?
I'm just gonna. Yeah, Bronnie, what was that?
Oh, I mean, at least when I read the bill, it looked to me like anybody over the age of 8 can ride them. And then
so there's an age limit?
8 years old.
Okay.
And some of them require like you have to be 18, but that's an internal company policy. So it's not, if we went the ordinance route, we would sort of be at the mercy of the app developers and their internal company policy. Does that make sense? Yeah. Or we restrict who can ride bikes. wouldn't want to do that. Okay. Yeah. Is that you, Karen?
Isn't it, I mean, because I know in Salt Lake, you have to have because I tried to, I mean, you have to have a credit card in order to even rent the scooter. So I don't know that, I mean, it's possible some kids have a debit card, but I mean, is there, seems like there's self-imposed restrictions.
There are some self-imposed restrictions like that. I mean, conceivably a parent could get one for their child. I don't necessarily see that happening. So it's maybe not the worst case scenario that we're worried about is likely, but our ability to regulate that via ordinance might be limited. Good question, Tom.
I would just throw in that providing access to the unbanked has been a concern for other cities that are looking to this to be a micromobility solution accessible to all. So looking at Bird's website, there's a couple stores in town that are franchises or chains that are part of the network whereby you can make a cash payment for credit on the Bird system. So that's potentially a good thing for access, but may not be a barrier for trying to keep youth under a certain age from using them.
Yeah. And actually, that's a really good segue, Kaylin, into my next slide, which is some best practices that have been developed when regulating these programs or designing these programs. And I want to thank Kaylin. Actually, he sent me a link to this great report created by the Institute of Transportation Studies at UC Berkeley. And some academics over there have been compiling case studies and identifying some best practices. So if we want to go the temporary operating agreement and RFP route, these are just, they kind of provide some hard lessons already learned in other cities that can guide us as we negotiate. One of them is about, I don't know if I included this one, but it is about providing cash payment options for low income users. And I won't go over all of these, but just to have in mind that this is a starting point that we would either to design an RFP or to negotiate a temporary operating agreement. It's about ensuring equitable access by making sure they're distributed throughout the community, putting them on pathways instead of sidewalks, requiring signage, requiring the full cost of our administration be part of the fee structure, and all of that. So lots to consider. And two, if you think of additional best practices or things that you have in mind or concerns that you have, please, there's going to be time to talk more about it, but just get your juices flowing about what you might have in mind. Okay, so, and this kind of gets to what the mayor was discussing at the top of this presentation. I think I have two potential pathways in mind. And what I'd love is some feedback from all of you about what you would like. We have a staff recommendation if you want to hear it. But option one is we start negotiating with Bird and we try to do some public engagement while we're doing that concurrently. And come to you eventually with some sort of temporary operating agreement. Another option is that we embark on this unified transportation plan, which we're doing, I believe, beginning in June, and we incorporate e-scooter and scooter share operator considerations into our larger public engagement of our transportation plan. So we get a really holistic view of how these get incorporated into our transportation system. And after that is complete and we kind of have that locked down, we start negotiating with Bird. And the reason I think we need engagement for either option is we need to define program goals. We need to know how we measure success, who's going to use them and how many people. Why are they being used? Is it for transportation, transit, micromobility, recreation? What data do we want? And why? And how do we use it? And how do we ensure equitable access and smart scooter distribution? So these are big questions that I don't know the answer to, and I think we can only get through outreach and engagement. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to the mayor to
Yeah.
do something. Yeah.
Let's take the conversation. So a couple of things. So it feels to me like, and correct me if I'm wrong, option one is, and moving forward with Bird, could result in an agreement, scooters, and then we would see usage and collect data and be able to, in real time, assess the impact that e-scooters will have on our community, both positive and negative. Whereas option two is essentially, I would expect a motion to table, and that would give us the time to, without having like, you know, with being able to look at other communities, for example, for examples of how it might feel in Moab, and look at data and look at the bigger picture of all things transportation. Option two and tabling will give us that ability. So it seems to me like that's where we can go as a council tonight. So you all can say, all right, we're ready to like try this out and see how it works and be a little messy with, you know, moving forward, knowing that it could and likely would change, or option to table to get through the unified transportation plan, which is really going to address all things transportation, including e-scooters, in a more comprehensive way. So, council, what do you all think? Tani?
Personally, I would rather table this and tie it to the Unified Transportation Plan. I don't feel like, and maybe I just don't have the imagination, but I don't feel like we have the infrastructure in place right now to support it. I mean, I don't know where we're going to find docking areas and how we're going to deal with this with the public. We've got a lot of conversation about e-bikes and the pathway and all of that moving forward. I feel like if we were just to move forward with this, our residents would probably tar and feather us. And, you know, during all of this discussions we had with OHVs and the noise and the speed limits, we were accused of discrimination. And there are kinds of discrimination that are bad. We don't discriminate against people because of their race, color, creed, national origin. Some kinds of discrimination are good. That means you're using discretion, and we discriminate every day. We look out the door, and if it's 20 below and snowing, we don't put on flip-flops and a tank top. So I think we really need to look at what we are doing and where we want our town to be in 5 years. And this feels like every kid in the world wants a trampoline, but if you live on a third floor apartment and have 2 bedrooms, a trampoline is not a good Christmas gift. So I think we really need to think hard about what we're doing.
Thanks, Tani. Others?
I'm also in favor of doing it via unified transportation plan. This process has caused me to reflect on my usage of the transportation network on an H-bike. And it seems like, frankly, there's times where I do use like really lightly used sidewalks because it's safer and like, but then it's like, it seems like the scooter companies may have no idea of like the hazards of utilizing Main Street and not being in a car. And so I feel like we need to evaluate our whole transportation system for all users and figure out things that make sense. And I'm not sure that how we're regulating them really makes sense for even the existing users. So I think really like approaching it in a comprehensive way will have a better outcome for all. And I also feel like the public engagement is really important because it seems like a number of people have had a not so good experience with Salt Lake, and that's already tainting like the process before we've even really gotten into it. So I feel like the public engagement will be important.
Well, I would entertain a motion at any point, if any of you would like to make one. Ronnie, you're unmuted.
Oh, I'm happy to make a motion, and I'm just going to add to what was said, because I think I'm in favor of tabling. Now I'll make a motion in a second, but there are a few other things connected to this that, with our history, Tawny and Kaylin brought up great things, and just obviously we made it through the bike skills park. We told our residents upon their request that we would not make any changes in use without a town hall or consulting them. And even though this isn't affecting, well, I don't know, some people might argue about the definition of what this is, but since we have to treat these like bicycles, this would mean these would be allowed on the parkway, and people have very strong feelings about that. So I think not only did we promise people we would provide that opportunity, but like everybody said, it's part of a bigger, it just makes a lot more sense for it to be discussed with other things. And then it gives us some time to gather information. Like I know some people locally are interested, like, oh, if there's an RFP, can I apply as a local company, and what would I have to provide? So anyway, information like that. So I would move to—
Well, hold on, wait, just right before you make the motion though, I do think it's worth it for our residents to know though, that if you are a private person, like human, and you own an electric scooter privately, you can ride it most everywhere. So e-scooters are allowed on the bike path, are allowed on the roads, and heaven forbid on Main Street. But so we're just talking about commercially operated. So it is important. So people, you know, because I think we've got sort of a watchdog culture where if somebody sees an e-scooter, they might say, "Oh, you're not allowed here." Well, that's not the case. So I just wanted to clarify that before the motion.
Yeah. So Emily or Carly, clarify for me. I know they can ride them in the bike lanes, but if there's a street without a marked bike lane, can they ride them? Can private operators and can Bird operate scooters on streets without designated bike lanes?
Well,
anywhere a bicycle could go.
Could go. If we do it by, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, I agree with everybody that's spoken. I don't think I've seen any letters yet saying, "Oh, I'm just dying to have scooters in town." A lot of pro e-bike letters, but not scooter letters. So I'm happy to table.
All right, let's get that motion.
I will move to table. Do you need a motion that's longer than that?
No, I do not. Is there a second?
I will second.
I'll second.
I'm going to take Mike's. He said it first. Mike.
I did.
Tawny.
Aye.
Ronnie.
Aye.
Kaylin.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. We're now in 7-2, our budget workshop. Joel and Ben.
So thanks, Mayor. We wanted to continue our discussion from the budget workshop that we had last week. If you recall, we went through the history a little bit of where the city has been historically with the budget and with its revenue streams, how that had changed in 1991, how that had changed in 1996, and again in 2006. We addressed with you the fact that we needed your permission to proceed, and also at this meeting, we would need a cap of how much we could request in a budget action for how much we could request in the rate to be generated through the property tax. And so we wanted to continue that discussion tonight. I've included not only myself and Ben, but Carly is here available to discuss aspects of how we are making the city responsible to UDOT for certain projects like hotspot funding, which we at this point are concerned about how we're going to fund. Chuck and Levi are also available to talk about projects that are shovel ready as far as infrastructure and things we could be doing if we had additional revenue. So I'll turn the time over to Ben. He can address kind of the budget aspects and the property tax aspects he did last time and what he's ready to talk about tonight. And then we'll just open it up to an open forum and then take your guys' questions and go forward with timetable and what that ceiling looks like that Ben discussed last time, and we'll go from there.
You know, I don't have I prepared a brief presentation. I want to make it really brief just because I feel like the open forum, the discussion is really where we're going to get the most value tonight. I dug deeper this week into our adopted tentative budget for this next year and found that we've added back a number of services that were cut due to tightening our belt due to COVID. And if I was to use an analogy, I'd say that our belt is so tight we're on the last hole. Unless we had some sort of a leather tool to start punching more holes, I think that the belt is as tight as it is going to get. And so I've asked myself, are the revenue streams that the city has, are they predictable, sustainable, and are they sufficient to cover our expenses and to cover our needs for the future? And I'm glad that Levi and Chuck are on here tonight because I would say the primary reasons, and we had the police chief, the primary reasons to pursue a property tax are because some of those, to have a predictable revenue stream like property tax is how we're going to be able to fund capital projects moving into the future. So I did want to make one correction to a comment I made in the last meeting. In this legislative session in 2021, the general fund balance limitation for municipal governments was actually increased to 35%. Previously, it was 25%. So I've been using that 25% number. Our general fund balance is currently 14%. And this is the money that you draw from in case of emergency. Without that CARES Funding Act money in place, the city would be in a dire financial situation right now. So that's kind of what we're hoping to avoid in the future. Another thing that I wanted to touch on was our debt service coverage ratio. That's basically how much money you're either putting away every year or how much money you're drawing on your savings. With our current budget, our debt service coverage ratio is 1. So net below 1 means that you're not putting money away. Above 1 means that you're putting money away for capital projects or for savings. So as far as when I look at it, it's we're at 1 at this point. So with those couple things in mind, I'll switch over to just a quick couple slides to keep myself on track. So the accountants are kind of crazy about cost allocation. So essentially for a cost to be equitable, we want a revenue stream to be associated with a line of service or a product, basically so that your business is in a nice clean silo. You want to assign your overhead costs. And governments, it's difficult to do that. You can't really have your police department pay for itself. That would be not a productive solution for government operations. And so basically we have these two revenue streams, sales tax and property tax, and that's how you pay for those services that don't fit in those nice little silos. So the other question is a property tax regressive or progressive? No matter what the solution is to any of these questions, no matter how we come up with enough money to pay for our capital improvements, or if we cut our expenses to pay for them, or we wait for them to fail, no matter what, this is going to be a regressive solution because this is going to be put on the shoulders of the local businesses and local residents. Property tax as a whole, whether it's progressive or regressive, really just depends on how you define it. There is one component of property tax that you don't get with any other tax. There are tax relief programs, tax abatement programs that are put in by the state as a bit of a circuit breaker so that those that truly can't afford property tax have a relief from that. This is kind of a side note. In conversations with Joel in the interview process, I told him that I was looking to work for a 3rd, 4th, or 5th class city. And he said, well, lucky for you, we represent all 3. Because at any given time, During the peak season, we're a third-class city. We have that number of people in our city that we're servicing. On any given week, it'll be a fourth-class city, and we're a fifth-class city technically because that's how many residents we have. I remember a cheesy bumper sticker, Moab, London, Paris. I haven't seen it for a long time, but I kind of have that feeling as I think about the size of Moab and the people that we're serving. So what I tried to do is I identified non-resort communities that were about the size of Moab. Some of these you may recognize, some of them you may not. These are cities in the state of Utah. Elk Ridge, and so what I did is the bar chart is the population. So this shows that they're all about 5,000 to 6,000 residents. Bar chart's the population. The orange graph, the orange line, it represents police spending. So this just shows as an example, like in Elk Ridge, it's a bedroom community. They contract with the sheriff's office. The sheriff probably drives through neighborhoods once a week and they pay him a few $1,000s. Whereas Moab City is truly running a $3+ million police department. This is something where these two cities are the same size and yet servicing a completely different customer base. And I believe all the council members, if you checked your email before the meeting, you have seen this already. This is an extension. Rachel presented this in the original budget meeting as a property tax as an option. This is essentially just showing what each class of property owner would pay in property tax with each level of revenue. So, and the quartiles represent the lower is the 25% point. The median quartile, that's 50%. Everybody's familiar with median, and upper quartile is that 75% point. So 75% at a $2 million property tax revenue, the upper 75% of property owners would pay $375 or more annually. And then secondary, this represents secondary homes, commercial properties. There's a lot bigger spread in commercial properties. There's small commercial properties with a low taxable value, and there's commercial properties with a high taxable value. So it really just depends on the valuation of the property, and then if and where the council chooses to place that ending revenue mark. So with that, I'll close my slides here. And really, the time is, I mean, if we have questions for Levi or Chuck, I mean, really, now's just the time to discuss this.
Ben, real quick, could you go into the requirement, the state statute requirement that we have to state the ceiling of what we could request in this meeting?
Yeah, so an email went out to council with proposed language for a motion that would be required if we were going to pursue a property tax this year.
Thank you, Ben, for doing that and providing that to council so that we can better understand. And thank you also for the correspondence regarding like that that amount. So and the range per type. That was really helpful. So thank you for creating that for us. Council questions. Who's up? Kaylin, you're up.
So with that table, does the residential have the primary residence discount versus the secondary residential that's taxed at full value?
It does. Yep. So that is where the taxable value. There's two terms when it comes to property values. There's the market value and taxable value. So I use the taxable value for this.
Okay, got it. That's why they're basically the same.
Yeah.
So Ben, if I understand the math correctly, taking the upper quartile of the residential zone, it looked like it was, if I divide it out, it's roughly what I would call a 4 mil tax. I mean, if I divide the additional taxes by the assessed value, it comes out 2.04 or something like that. Does that make any sense?
2.4 is
2.4? Really?
Yeah.
I didn't get that. Okay, I'll do it again. Thank you.
We can share math a little bit later.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions.
Actually,
Oh,
I'll take a stab. So the primary residence is one property tax abatement. Could you specify some others?
Sorry, regarding property tax abatement,
Yes.
like what the conditions are for property tax abatement, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Mike, I do have to correct myself. So at this, you are right that at 4 mills at the 3.3 million mark.
Correct.
2.4.
Oh, it was a different number elsewhere. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Yep. Got it.
So property tax abatement, and this is on Grand County website. Every county website has the tools for property tax abatement. It's age and income based is the first avenue. Active duty military, blind, disabled veterans, indigent and low income, exempt status, which I'm not familiar with that one. And there's a renter refund.
A nonprofit.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then there's a renter refund application, which is another one I'm not familiar with. So I had a conversation with the state auditor's office. This was a couple of years ago, and we were talking about enterprise fund transfers. So this is where a city can charge a rate for water and then transfer that money to the general fund through a legislative process. And the state auditor's office really frowns on doing that because that is definitely a regressive tax. Whereas and the reason for that is because of these property tax relief programs that the state has put in place. Basically what you're doing is bypassing those programs that are already in place.
Thanks. Another one. Are there any overhead costs that we should be aware of? Like, for example, the county handles assessment and appeals of assessed value, and I'm assuming that they would continue to play that role, but might they want to pass on part of that cost to the city if we start assessing a property tax, or are there other costs that we should be aware of that would affect our net if we raise the property tax rate?
So because the work is already being done by every county in the state of Utah, I believe counties even have a very small portion to cover the cost of that assessment. Essentially, every dollar paid in as a property tax as a resident is returned to the city. So there's no overhead costs associated with it.
Thanks.
Ben, I'm so grateful for all of the work that you've done around this. We definitely have in front of us the different options within whether or not we pursue the mill levy, the property tax. So council, I guess, now's the time if any of you would like to make a motion using Ben's suggested language to move this process forward. Ronnie?
I happen to have it in front of me, so let me know if I get this wrong. I move to proceed with consideration of exceeding the certified tax rate for fiscal year 2021 through 2022. The amount to consider is not to exceed 3.3 million and would be used to support increased funding for law enforcement and general infrastructure improvements.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Discussion?
Ben, can you just clarify for me? That 3.3 million, that's as high as we can go, but we don't have to go that high this first year. Can we do this incrementally?
That's correct. You could set it at 0 again. Essentially, this is just opening the conversation and it's setting a ceiling which you cannot go above. So.
And we would
Just
develop
authorizing-
sorry, one sec, Joel. So, and we would develop that number where when we finally land on that number, we would have a process of community engagement leading up to the determination of that number by this council, correct? So we don't have to make that determination now.
We're not, I want to be crystal clear, we're not making that determination now. We are setting a ceiling not to exceed in amount through this process what we can do. So this is authorizing us to start the process and we cannot exceed 3.3 million. If we go through this entire process, have public engagement, public hearings, present a budget, and the council says, we want to leave the mill levy at 0.0000, they absolutely can do that. And if they want to land somewhere between 0.0 and generating $3.3 million, they can land anywhere in between that, but they cannot exceed 3.3 million.
Thank you, Joel. Any other questions or discussion? Oh, yes, Karen.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I'd just like to state that, I mean, everyone on this council is very aware that, any sort of tax increase is a very difficult discussion to have. And, a property tax where we hear over and over that, that we are lacking housing, that housing is very expensive, and being, very aware that if there are renters, this is going to be a pass-through tax from anyone who owns the home, that is probably going to be, the burden is going to be on renters. And so, but we are also confronted almost daily with requests for more enforcement and road improvements and signs and infrastructure. And so, I mean, we really are in a situation where, having a general fund balance at 14% in savings is a precarious situation. And so I would just like to state that it is difficult, but have you been given a second?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to echo Karen's comments. I think she makes an excellent point. This is not an easy decision. And the reality is we're at 14% in our general fund or in our rainy day fund. We're balanced in our budget, but we're not saving anymore. When we have that $68 million deficit in infrastructure, we're not generating any revenue to be able to tackle that and start putting in new roads, new water, and new sewer lines. And that's what we need to be doing. And we haven't historically done a lot of that for a number of years, if not decades. And it's piling up to the point that they're failing. And it's come to the point where we either have to do something to generate more revenue to be able to start picking up for the decades of non-work, or we have to accept that this level of infrastructure and service is what we have, and this is what we can do. And I don't know that either one of them are an easy answer to accept. And I don't know which one, is the better of the two. So it's where we're at, and it's an excellent point.
Good point, Joel. And Ben, I would offer once again that if we're to successfully sell this, I know we don't have to it's not voted on or anything like that by the public, but nonetheless, I personally would be reluctant to pass a tax increase like this that doesn't enjoy adequate, I'll put it that way, popular support. And one question people are going to ask is, well, gee, we got by for years, with without having to have a property taxes. What's changed? You guys are just splurging or something like that? In other words, it's going to take a well thought out, concise description of if we kick cans down the road, for example. Whatever the rationale is going to be, it's going to have to be believable and saleable that we really do need this, and as Ben put it, there's no more notches in our belt, and to be successful at selling it. So I would encourage us to start working on that dialogue.
And that's a great point too, Mike. I think if we choose to do nothing, I would argue that nothing has changed. that in 1991, the city turned its rate to zero, and we've been kicking the can for 30 years as our infrastructure has continued to deteriorate. It's not a fluke that the motion is written the way that it is written. This is not a request of funds to hire more staff. This is a request of funds so we can have a lot more law enforcement, work on roads, work on water, and work on sewer. That is what we're asking to be enabled to do.
Yeah. And the other one of the final point is, I mean, some people are going to point to the increase in administrative expenses, which started with David Everett, for example. But Moab is not the same town that it was 5 or 10 years ago. It's way bigger, as we pointed out so many times, with a world of new requirements and so forth. And I don't think we can really get away with going back to the old days and picking small administrative expenses. So that's another justification for asking for what we're asking for.
And that's another good point too, Mike. And with the administrative staff you had in the past, with the number you had in the past, I would argue that's a part of why these problems weren't being addressed. You didn't have the staff on hand that could actually tackle these large problems, and that's why the can kept getting kicked. In order to be able to do these projects, the team you have now is capable of doing them, and we're ready to do them.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? We have a motion on the table. I will call for the vote. Ronnie?
Aye.
Tawny? Tawny?
You're muted, Tawny.
I know. I was having finger issues.
Thank you. Karen?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Approval of bills against the city of Moab. Is there a motion, Tawny?
Mayor, was the public hearing for the budget formally closed?
Neither of the public hearings were formally closed.
There is a motion in the packet for closing the budget hearing. Not sure if you're going to do that later or if.
Well, I actually intended on doing that right after the public hearing was held, but all things Zoom. Is there a motion to close both public hearings?
I move to close both public hearings.
Thank you, Kaylin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mike? Call for the vote. Mike?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Okay, thanks, Kaylin. And Tawny, a motion for the bills?
Sure. I move to approve the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $413,296.04.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kaylin. I will call for the vote. Ronnie?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. We are now at section 9, executive closed session. So thank you, staff, all staff for attending. We'll say good night to all staff except for Joel. And summarize both you and Carrie.
Do you want to do your motion to go into closed session? So I have that before you actually close.
Oh, before we record, yeah, thank you. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
I can move to go into closed session to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual or individuals.
Thank you, Ronnie. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Mike?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Karen? Uh-oh, Karen, you're frozen. Karen, you were frozen, sorry.
Oh, yeah, bad connection. Aye.
No worries. Okay. I guess now we'll stop the recording and stop the streaming.
Yep, give me just a second. And I was told that Danny would be attending the closed session, so I will make her the host and I will vacate the Zoom.
Thank you, Summer.